This man is about to send his daughter to an orphanage. But why is he so heartless? Because the girl is both deaf and blind, and she isn't even his biological daughter. Not long ago, the girl's mother was deep in debt and chose to end her life. A debt collector came knocking, hoping to find something valuable in the house. When he turned around, he noticed a little girl hiding under the table, eating moldy bread. He tried asking where the money and jewelry were, but soon realized that the girl couldn't see or hear him. Frustrated and empty-handed, he decided to smoke a cigarette to calm himself down. Unexpectedly, the girl smelled the smoke and thought her mother had returned. She crawled out and tapped on the floor towards the balcony. Curious, the man mimicked her tapping. The girl, thinking she had found someone she could trust, immediately hugged him, only to realize that the person she was holding wasn't her mother. Terrified, she scrambled back under the table. Just then, the landlord knocked on the door. The man tried to cover the girl's mouth, but she bit him. Hearing the commotion inside, the landlord came back. The man had no choice but to open the door, without realizing that this simple action would completely change his life. The landlord mistook him for the girl's father, and warned him that the house was too messy. When the lease expired, he would be forced to leave but would receive an $80,000 deposit refund. Upon hearing this, the man made a decision. He would pretend to be the girl's father and take care of her for 1 month to get the money. He went online to research how to raise a child, but the biggest challenge was getting the girl to acknowledge him as her father. That wasn't going to be easy. The man tried to teach her to say, "Dad," forgetting that she couldn't hear. He then attempted to bribe her with food, placing a bowl of delicious noodles in front of her. But despite the aroma, the girl was too cautious and continued eating her moldy bread instead. Worried she'd get sick, the man threw away all the moldy bread. But this only made her panic. Without it, she felt unsafe. She knocked over the noodles and hid under the table again. Realizing how much the bread meant to her, the man went out and bought fresh bread. To his surprise, the girl saw this as an act of kindness and finally approached him to steal his noodles. Watching her eat so messily, the man was both frustrated and amused. That night, the girl couldn't sleep. She crawled toward him, silently crying. Perhaps finally understanding that her mother was truly gone. She soon fell sick from grief, and the man rushed her to the hospital. As they waited, he carried her on his back, gently rocking her to sleep. Without realizing it, she had become important to him. The next day, he wanted to send her to school, but she refused to go without her mother's old clothes. The lingering scent of her mother was the only thing that gave her comfort. But school was another challenge. Blind students needed to use touch and hearing, while deaf students needed to use vision and sign language. A child who was both deaf and blind. The school had no idea how to teach her. On the way home, the girl clung tightly to the man's clothes. He was the only person she could trust, the only anchor in her dark world. Feeling her grip, the man gently held her hand. Feeling his warmth, she smiled. Determined to teach her something, the man bought a box of learning toys so she could recognize different shapes and letters. He wanted her to learn to write so he could prove she was his daughter, and claimed the deposit. To his amazement, she learned quickly. As a reward, he gave her bread. But just when he thought things were going well, disaster struck. The girl's mother hadn't just owed money to the company, she also had unpaid loans from the bank. The court froze all assets, including the rental deposit he was counting on. Just when he was questioning his life choices, his company reminded him to finish his original job, debt collection. He was no longer required to pretend to be the girl's father, but he couldn't bring himself to leave her alone. He returned to the apartment, where the girl was sitting on the floor, waiting for him. Maybe he had intended to use her at first, but she had already come to rely on him completely. One day, the man learned that his company planned to target the girl directly to force repayment. Panicked, he offered to take on all the debt himself. The company seized all his money and maxed out his credit cards. Looking at the sleeping girl, he wondered what she had been like as a baby. While browsing through her late mother's phone, he discovered a message. Her mother had loaned $50,000 to a relative who had never repaid her. This was his last hope. He took the girl and went to find the woman. But would the journey be smooth? He posted missing person flyers everywhere. While he was searching, he suddenly realized the girl was gone. Frantic, he ran around looking for her. An elderly man called out to him. It turned out that a kind farming couple had invited the girl to see their puppies. But the old man had a hidden agenda. He invited the man to stay for a meal, then kept assigning him chores, pulling weeds, cleaning the barn, even repairing the roof. Under the old man's watchful eye, he and the girl eventually had to flee. On the road, the girl got thirsty, but there were no stores nearby. The man resorted to stealing a watermelon, thinking no one saw him, until he realized there was a security camera right above him. By the river, he let the girl feel the watermelon's texture while teaching her new words. But before they could relax, the watermelon owner arrived, waving a security video as proof. Once again, the man was forced into hard labor. That night, as it rained, the man finally got a moment to rest in his car. But seeing the lonely girl, he forgot his exhaustion and went outside to play with her. Holding an umbrella over her, he became the light in her darkness, allowing her to run freely in the rain. One night, while eating, the girl offered him food from her hand. At first, he scolded her for bad manners, until an elderly woman explained she was sharing the best part with him because she saw him as family. But happiness was short-lived. The debtor they had been looking for was a con artist and had long since disappeared. With no hope left, the man decided to quit everything and just find a job to support the girl. But could life really be that simple? Meanwhile, his company tracked him down, thanks to a viral video. His former colleagues found him, beat him up, and warned him if he didn't repay the money in a week, he'd better find a good place to be buried. That night, he noticed the elderly woman's hidden stash of money. If he took it, he could escape his troubles. But then, the girl touched his wounded face, gently blowing on it to ease his pain. Unable to hold back his emotions, he let her feel his tears and wrote the word "tear" in her palm. The next day, he left, not with stolen money, but with the girl. He tried to hand her over to her biological father, but the man refused responsibility. Clearly, the girl didn't like him either. So, the man took her to the ocean, letting her say goodbye to her mother. Watching her play on the shore, he finally looked like a real father. That night, he drank alone. He wished he could raise her himself, but he knew his company wouldn't let him go. So, their story, like their bond, would end with a loaf of bread. The next day, he took her to an orphanage. She happily accepted the bread he gave her, unaware of what was happening. But as soon as he left, she sensed something was wrong. She dropped the bread and ran, searching for him in a panic, until a glass door stopped her. The man stood outside, hesitating. When he saw her banging on the door, he could no longer hold back. He opened it. The girl ran into his arms, frantically writing "tear" on his palm, then hitting his shoulder, telling him, "We'll face this together." At that moment, the man realized he wasn't pretending anymore. She wasn't just a girl, she was his daughter.